Hello, hello. What's up? What's up? It is a new day, it is a new week, and it's time to get social. My name is KaVonna, and welcome to the Introvert's Social Hour. Welcome. Today we are talking about if the 9 to 5 life we are all guided towards is a scam. Is it worth it? What's going on with this? We're talking about it from a zillennial perspective. I like to call myself a zillennial in a way. I don't really feel like I identify with both. But fresh into this world, it's kind of like interesting figuring what that 9 to 5 life looks like and is it all it's shaped up to be? Now, of course, not everyone one works a 9 to 5 in the sense sometimes it's a 7 to 3 or a 10 to 6, or some people also work their own hours or part time. So you may or may not directly connect with this, but there are so many options. But we are talking about that person who's working that 8 hours a day. So for this topic, I brought a friend from college. We've worked together. We've done a lot of things outside of 9 to 5, very much part time too, together in college. Someone who has worked a 9 to 5 for 2 years at this point and is also currently getting out of it too. Please welcome Andrew to the podcast. Woo woo.
Hello, hi. Thanks for having me.
Of course. How you doing today, Andrew? How's life?
It's been nice. So I know you just mentioned that I'm getting out of the 9 to 5. I just did that like this past week. So it's been good. I don't know when this is going up, so it might be some time since then, but I
Yeah.
feel in a in a way a little bit of a release. I feel excited to wrap up and I might be going into another one right afterwards, but at least we get a little bit of a transition. So you caught me at a good time.
Yeah.
Um and I've been doing a lot of self-reflecting. So I think today is going to be awesome
Yeah,
because
I was gonna
it's
say
been a
perfect
lot of what I've
timing.
been thinking about.
That's awesome. Literally perfect timing. It was like, I would love to hear some of your perspectives too, as like changing out of it. Um, Obviously you don't know where you're going next, but like that transitional phase I think is so cool. So I'm definitely gonna pick your brain.
Mhm.
I will want to say, so you've been doing a 9 to 5 for 2 years. Was that your first 9 to 5 job?
Yeah. So I think we graduate at the same time. I think
2020 for
around
me.
yeah 2020. So like
Okay.
when I graduated, I went straight into a 9 to 5. It was for a startup, and I lasted about a month, and I ended up quitting right afterwards. Mostly because it was I there was a lot of yelling involved, and it
Ooh.
was my first time working in like a marketing environment. It was very
Mhm.
stressful, very high stress. I don't think I really understood what I was getting myself into.
Got it.
Um, and then I took a small break in between then, but I picked up a 9 to 5 around the year after, around like middle of the year. So
Mm.
since then, I've been going strong for almost 2 years now. I switched jobs one time in between then. I started in July of 2021
Okay.
and I worked until December of 2021, and then I switched over to my current job right now. And
Got
I've
it.
been working there since then until end of July 2023, which is when I'm officially gonna leave.
Ooh. So like literally exactly almost exactly like 2 years.
Yeah, not the same job, but yeah, 2 years of just consistent. I work at 8 to 4:30 job.
Mhm.
But it's the same amount of like time because I know 9 to 5 people take like a 1 hour lunch.
Mhm.
For us, it is a 1 hour lunch, but technically like 30 minutes of that is paid because we combine our 15 minutes. So I know
Got it.
some companies do that, and so I follow 8 to 4:30, but it's 8 hours of working for 2 years.
Okay. See? Okay. So I know you told me your experience as far as like your the first one when you were there for a month. What has your experience been like at a 9 to 5 so far in like these last 2 years?
Yeah, so I think going out of college, I was really craving stability for the most part as
Yeah.
a college student, like especially since we were on such a tight schedule most of the time, like our schedules will look different so frequently because of
Mm-hmm.
our jobs, but also because of our classes and things. So I was just really in the beginning, I was really excited being like, hey, I'm gonna have 40 hours a week. I know exactly what my hours are going to be. I know how to plan around my day. And it's going to be like that consistently. And to a certain extent, I still feel that way right now. Like, I really appreciate having a consistent routine. It
Mm-hmm.
keeps me kind of on a schedule. And for me, I think my life kind of craves that kind of structure. So I appreciate that. But there is a certain moment where I feel like you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be doing this for the rest of my life, and then you're like, oof, oh wait, but I'm gonna be doing this for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
And I think that realization was a little bit difficult. And these past 2 years, like I definitely have gotten used to that structure and working in that structure. So I feel pretty comfortable in it.
Hmm.
But right now I would say I have a very like pros and cons. Like there are parts where I do enjoy like that stability for one is one of the things I really enjoy. But
Yeah.
to another extent, like one just random thing I can think of is that like for medical appointments or for like dentist appointments specifically for me, their hours are exactly the same as my working hours.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I'm like, okay, so like this job is great because it gives you benefits, but then you can't really use those benefits the way that you wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to go out and get an appointment done. And I think for me, like it's when it doesn't work the way that it's supposed to is when things get a little dicey, like for example, if I have an appointment in the middle of the day, I have to take time off, and then
Hmm.
that messes up how your regular schedule goes and what your responsibilities look like. And so when it works, it works. When it doesn't, it doesn't. I don't know. I feel like that's the best way I can put it.
Okay. I like that you mentioned that because I didn't when I was thinking of this podcast, even though this that is something I always think about, um
Mm.
I had not thought about the medical like dentist part of it all. Um we'll talk about it further, but just like a random insert, I do think it's kind of weird that they don't insert, you know how we have like sick hours and we have like
Mhm.
all these other things, like we should have like specific hours in order for us to go take doctor's appointments where we shouldn't be taking our personal time away.
Yeah. Or like I know like for example like my boss is like cool with it if we just let her know and we take the time off at sick hours or whatever, but
Hmm.
some people aren't. And I think you bring up a good point, like because certain things about work are like laws. You have to take lunch, and those are all set
Hmm.
to protect workers like us. So is that part of a protection that we need, in terms of like the easy access to medical services and being able
Yeah.
to use them? I know COVID brought us a couple of those, um in
Yeah.
terms of like more flexibility, but like yeah, is there like
Yeah.
a greater way
I
of making that happen, or legalizing something, or having a policy?
I definitely think it'd have to be for sure, like it'd have to go the policy route for sure for it to be like solidified. Um, and I do now wonder like how many people are thinking that same exact thing. Because then I wonder like how close would it be to getting to a point of like policy and stuff. But yeah, that's a good point to make. Um, I s- so you can know my background a bit. I didn't officially get my first 9 to 5 until January 2022. Post college, I was actually doing a lot of part-time work.
Mhm.
So my first part, not my first part-time, my first full-time job is being a teacher, and I'm still a teacher. So I've been doing it now for about a year and some change, a year and a half at this point. A half a school year and a full school year in total. Um, for me, it's a bit longer, especially because I work at a charter school. So we have to be there at 7:30. And then because I teach dance now and they changed their school hours this recent school year. So I'm there from 7:30 to 4:45, which is really intense.
Wow.
Um,
That's wild. That's
I
wild.
know. Yeah. And sometimes on test days, because once again, it's a charter school, they kind of just do whatever. They require us to be there by 7. So for test days, to
So
prepare.
is that like a 9-hour day for you?
Yeah, it's long.
Wow.
Hmm.
Is it hourly? Is it an hourly job?
No, so that's another
Oh.
thing. So, um, and we'll talk about that more too. I talked about it in my teacher's podcast as well. Like they're playing in our faces.
Oh.
So that's been the biggest struggle because I'm there longer than 8 hours, which already makes me kind of like hate the 8 hour model in general.
Right.
Um, and then it's constant work because usually teachers getting those breaks and things like that. I wish it was a little bit more structured and formulated. With that, oh, you 15 here, 15 there, get a, an hour there, things like that. Because while I haven't worked full time before that. I had worked part time and I've worked full time days, and I know what that system looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's very rough. Um, so currently I am in the goal of finding that transition, and looking for that next step. So
Right.
that's why I was like, oh, I'd love to pick your brain because that's where I'm at as well. I'm like, yeah, everything is not equating right now. And we'll talk about that. So
Yeah.
let's just like go based off like what the 9 to 5 style looks like. So we already know in the United States specifically, it's Monday to Friday. There's 7 days in a week. Those are five
Mm-hmm.
of them. And then you're usually working either a 9 to 5 or, as you said, like 8:30, 4:30, or whatever. There's 7 to 3 and different things like that, 10 to 6, different ranges of what an 8 hour workday looks like. Um, and some people have wondered like what those like that their high expectations and demands is what people say, in regards to like individuals and the work structure,
Mm-hmm.
um in regards to like jobs expect more from us than they are willing to give themselves, if that makes sense. um
Yes.
what do you think about that? Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Yeah, I mean, it's a it's an interesting thing because I saw so I know TikTok isn't like the best source to go for it,
Hey,
but
listen.
someone sent one of my coworker actually sent me this TikTok because we were talking about it. But it's interesting that we place value in like people's work based on number of hours that we put in because
Hmm.
like it's very interesting because you work a salary job and I work hourly, so I get paid dependent on how much I work.
Exactly.
So in a way that favors me because like if I work longer hours, I'm like, hey, you can, you have to pay me more. I get overtime or things like that.
Hmm.
And versus a salary where if you work a little bit more, it's more like, well, you're still getting the same pay. Um, what's really interesting though is that if I, for example, like, let's say you and I have our coworkers and we have the same job, right?
Yeah.
And let's say, for the sake of examples, let's say like I'm just a shit, I'm just a terrible
You're good.
worker. I'm just a lazy worker. I don't want to say lazy because that's also a subjective term. Let's just say I get my work done at like a very slow pace. I'm
Hmm.
just I take longer to learn, maybe a task that someone can get done in like 2 hours takes me four. Let's say,
Yeah.
for example, and that's valid, everybody has a different pace of getting work done. And let's say you're like a speed demon and you get stuff done really quickly.
Hmm.
Um, the thing is we work the same amount of hours, but most likely we're going to be doing like a different amount of workload. And
100%.
I think that is like weird because like so I've had that experience a little bit where like I'm wanting to be the best employee that I can be. So if I'm efficient, then that makes it better and I get more stuff done. And then I started realizing that like my boss like, okay, you just finished, I'm just going to give you some
More
more
work.
stuff to do.
Hmm.
And I'm kind of sitting there like, hey, like that's fine, but also I'm kind of tired. I was hoping like me getting this thing done quicker means that I don't have to like spend 8 hours doing this. I could
Yeah.
have some downtime or maybe I could take a break and then get to something else. um so I think that's interesting just because the expectations and demands kind of shift, I think, depending on from person to person. And some people work based on what needs to get done, right? Like you have this and this, you have this project that you need to finish, and you have a certain time frame to do that. So for like a salary worker, for example, you might work a little bit of extra hours, or maybe you might get stuff done quickly, but as long as it gets done, that's more so the goal. And then and I'm experiencing on my end as a 9 to 5, like maybe like an hourly worker. It's like, well, if you can get stuff done quicker, then we're gonna squeeze more stuff into those hours because
Mm.
by 4:30, I'm like, okay, I'm out. Bye. Right. No,
Yeah.
regardless of what happened that day, regardless of whether I had a lot to do or whether I had a little to do.
Hmm.
So I think there's a bit of an imbalance there. I
I
can't
agree.
seem to think of like a solution to that. Like there's that salary, like my coworkers are salary workers, and sometimes
Hmm.
they stay like 2, 3 extra hours and they still get paid the same. So in a way,
Yeah.
there's like pros and cons. And it's like where's the I guess the sweet spot for those kinds of things, and
Hmm.
my only answer is more so like money. It's like
I
how
was
much
about
are you
to
actually.
literally though, I was about to say the same thing. I think salary wouldn't be an issue and is not an issue for people who feel like they are getting paid the work they're doing. Like if it's
Yep.
equivalent. Um, because like if you're getting overworked, I think that gets very obvious. Like you know what
Hmm.
your job description is, you know what they said you were going to do, and all of a sudden they start giving you somebody else's work. Oh, okay,
Yes.
well, that's weird. Or all of a sudden they're starting to give you work that's above your technically above your pay grade because that's
Yep.
a higher role. So
Yep.
that's when it's like, okay, well, that's not equivalent. And that's the struggle because salary, they can just kind of give you, need something else to do, Bob. Just kind of like you said, oh, you're
Right.
done. Oh, here you go. And that's something else. Oh, can you stay an extra hour or so to do this? Or, oh, this needs to be done. Make sure it's done. Here's the deadline, whether you get it done at work and at the desk or whether you get it done at home, which is a struggle I kind of have. And that's just a general teacher struggle as well.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I 100% agree with that. I also have that struggle of I tend to be that person who's like, not necessarily in regards to speed, but I put a bit more care into my work, no matter what it is.
Hmm.
Um, and I have had those experiences where I'm putting 100% into my job and someone's putting in, to be honest, like 50, and we're getting paid the same. And that becomes, weird to me. And once again, that's the struggle of, well, how do you really solve that? That's not, I don't know, that one's even harder. Um, but I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I it's you kind of want, and it's like it's a balance too, because it's like, when we talk about in just general terms, like everyone who has a job should be able to afford where they live, and
Yeah.
do what they want to do in terms of like just have enough to live, have a roof over your head, to be able to eat, things like
Hmm.
that. Like part of the reason why I'm also leaving is because I'm moving out, and it's because what I'm being paid just doesn't match up with what the city requires me,
Yeah.
to that's a whole separate, topic for another time. But it's like
Hmm.
it becomes a lot easier when, like, it's easier for you to focus on work if the money that you're making takes care of all the other, like, I don't want to say issues in your life, but like things that need attention in your life. If I think eating out is a really good example. Like if you can afford to eat out all the time, you don't have to worry about cooking when you get home. Or
Yeah.
especially if you have a family and you need to feed people that isn't just you.
Hmm.
I feel like that really becomes a big thing. And I know there's also folks who don't have that privilege, where they work that same amount of hours and they still have to find a way to make it work because they don't get paid enough.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's I when you bring up like working part-time, but also working the same amount of hours as a full-time person, you're working full-time, but as a part-time worker, like
Yeah.
that happens a lot, especially on my family side. I can,
Mhm.
can relate to that because they don't really get a lot of benefits, and they don't get sick
Yeah.
hours. And if they have to go to a medical appointment, they just lose the money essentially,
Hmm.
because they miss out on that timing. So in a way, I feel like I'm speaking from like a place of privilege because I was personally happy with, like, the benefits and,
Hmm.
the workers protections, because I am covered under a union, and that's a big,
Oh, see, yeah. Hmm.
yeah, that is a big thing, because there's a lot of negotiation, and there's a lot of, like, big backing behind us to
Hmm.
be able to get those benefits. But this is, an ideal situation, like when it's good, when you have the benefits and when you have supportive people in your circle, like all of those things work towards making it work. But then when it doesn't work, for example, like when they give you more stuff to do as a teacher, or if they don't pay you enough, or if your insurance doesn't work in the places because you have to take time off of work to get it done,
Hmm.
like when it doesn't work, I feel like that's when we start to see like
Yeah.
the issues with what the model is.
And I do want to talk about that because I think that's the most important part. Like everything that you mentioned, it falls on your personal like quality of life. Like,
Hmm.
so I do want to like move into like the struggles and the sacrifices that we make
Yeah.
for our work. I can give some examples as well. Like, so you mentioned like so many that are really awesome as well. But I even like I always think of this idea of like we're expected to sleep 8 hours and then also work 8 hours. That's 16 hours gone. Let's not even talk about commute time, right? To work. Let's not even talk about, like you said, say you got to cook food, say you got to prep. for your meals for the week. You also people also say, hey, you should also make sure you are doing some form of physical activity.
Hmm.
So what does that look for you in your week? That doesn't include social time, just personal health and self-care time, which tends to be the thing that falls off first, to be quite
Right.
honest. Then leads to like health decline and loss of that self-care and personal time and social time with others, which I think was the most frustrating thing for me, because I was like, I like snapped to this thing of like, I'm important, and like because the job was so intense, I was like, why am I prioritizing this job that would never prioritize me? Like, that they always say that thing of like they would
Yes.
find someone else quick to replace you. And that is so true
Hmm.
because fun fact, my job, constant, constant new people coming in because the I can't even think of the proper term, but like the new hire rate, let's just say that I can't think of the proper term right now, is so high because so many people
Yeah.
quit.
Same,
um
same in my, I don't want to even say in my department, but just where I work in general.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's I'm so glad you brought up commute because that's a big thing for me. So I work 8 to 4:30. So I actually leave my house, my apartment actually. I leave my apartment at 6:30 in the morning because the
Ooh,
commute to work, I don't have a car. So that's a big thing.
got it.
Um,
So you're busing.
yeah, I bus to work. That takes an hour and a half. So
Yeah.
I'm there 8 to 4:30, and then I get off, and the buses aren't so lucky to me. So I get home around 6:20. So
Yeah.
it's actually like
It's
12
a 12-hour
hours out of
day.
my day. Yeah, no, 12 hours just consistently. And um I mean, I consider that to be to be a sacrifice. So I
Yeah.
have about like, if I want 8 hours of sleep, I have about like 3 to 4 hours to squeeze in all the rest of the things that I want to squeeze in. And I'm glad you bring that up because, again, a lot of the things that we have to take care of is outside of that. Like 16 hours already just is
Wiped.
bonkers to me, you know, like it's
Hmm.
just wiped away. And the expectations that are placed on you, like I don't know if societal or just whatever, but like you mentioned, like you need to exercise every day and you need to, like eat healthy and you need to, take care of yourself and self-care and keep appearances together and see your
Yeah.
friends. Just that consistency, I think, like even if you are able to do that, I think
Hmm.
there's like a question about like how sustainable that is, and
Yeah.
how frequently you can do it. Because there was a point where I feel like I could have done that, like, and there was a point where
Mhm.
I was doing that, but like only for like a week and a half, you know.
Exactly.
And then
Because
you're
that
just like,
drain.
yeah, and then you're just like, one day you just come home. Like for me, I think we can relate because it sounds like, like I work with students and you also work with students, although in different capacities. It's
Yeah.
like it's a emotionally and mentally exhausting job. Like we don't necessarily come home like my body's aching because I, carry so many things, but
Yeah.
more so like I just need to lie down because I just don't want to think for however much. And losing
Hmm.
that ability for the rest of your day is just very detrimental. Like, you
Yeah.
know, it's odd because I also worked a physical job before where it's just all like it was like food service. So I was just
Hmm.
not very like emotionally invested into it, but it was just more like getting things done. And it
Yeah.
was like, oh yeah, my body's aching, but I also want to see my friends. I want to do all these things. And sometimes I think about like, yeah, maybe like like I had a very typical like university like privileged education route, but it's also like, okay, but like what about just like physical labor, like that isn't
Hmm.
sustainable, long term, like going
Yeah.
into older ages. But it's like that's the industry that my parents go into, and it's like sometimes they're happier that way. So I think
Hmm.
about like their sacrifices on multiple ends. It has to be physical, mental, emotional. And I don't really
Wow.
know what a good solution for that is. People always tell you like take care of yourself,
Hmm.
but what does that mean? I don't know what that
Yeah.
means.
I do think it is hard to do with the current work style that we have. Like as you said, like where do they find the time? The people that do, and even I was like, ooh, I'm doing it, for a week, but there's that mental exhaustion of you're pushing yourself to really fit in everything. And in
Hmm.
reality and realistically, all that stuff is not going to fit in a 24-hour period.
Hmm.
And it's hard because I also want to mention this too. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, but for me, that weekend is not a full 2 day weekend
No,
because I'm working Monday through Friday. Saturday, I'm kind of
no.
chilling. Maybe I'm getting all the errands I need to get done for the weekend.
Catch up day. Yeah.
Catch up
I call it
day.
catch up. Yeah.
Yes, that's a good one. And then I kind of get Sunday scaries. So then let's say Sunday comes around and I'm meal prepping. I'm cooking for the week. I'm making sure my clothes are washed for the week. I'm
Yeah.
doing all this stuff to make sure I'm ready for Monday. There is no day where I can just pause, you know? And so
Mm-mm.
I think about that a lot because it's just like there's just no time. Literally, what 8 times 4 is 24, right?
Yes.
Quick math. So 25% of our
8,
day.
16, 24, 32. 30.
Oh, thank you. See,
32.
never
I said
mind, not
yes.
quick math.
Without even, I said yes without even knowing. We're both liable. Um,
Oh. Yeah,
yeah,
so
32 hours.
so whatchamacallit, that's even more time. That takes up a lot. I feel like, I don't know, even though it's not 25% directly, that's still a huge chunk of our is that 25%? I feel like that's 25%. Huh? No, don't ask me about my
Oh, we gotta
math.
get a we got
Don't
we
I
gotta
was
get a
like, don't ask me about
calculator
my
for this
math.
one.
Listeners, ignore my mathematics. But it does take a huge chunk of the day. And I think that if we're gonna do a 9 to 5, I think that it should be not 5 out of the 7 days of the week. Um,
Yes.
yeah, that's just my take. But I did want to go back to what you said because I do think it was still on topic of how money is not equating to the work. And more
Yes.
importantly, money is not equating specifically because no matter how much I'm working, it's still not covering the bills I need to pay to survive on my own. Right. The
Yes.
math is not mathing, just like mine wasn't. The math is not mathing. Because it's like I'm working, as I said, 9 hours. So fun fact, because I relate to you so much. I used to work in the Bronx and I live in Queens. For New Yorkers, you understand. For your perspective, I was commuting about an hour and a half on a worst day, 2 hours on a really, really bad day of
Oh,
trains, an hour
oh,
on the best day. So I had to leave my apartment at the latest 6:4. I remember 6:14. I had to make the 6:14 train. So I was leaving around like 6:04. It takes about 10 minutes or so.
oh,
And then there were days where I didn't get home till like, oh, I can't remember. I was so mad. The trains were struggling that day. It was
oh yeah.
crowded because I didn't get home till like 7. And I was like, I've been gone from my apartment for more than 12 hours.
Like
This is a
13 hours
problem.
literally, yeah.
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 I was not
Yeah.
happy about that.
We live in
Um,
the same life.
yeah, it's better
No.
now because I do work in Queens now. I switched schools for that reason.
Hmm.
So my shortest commute now, thank goodness, is 30 minutes.
Oh wow.
On a good
Oh,
day,
happy for you.
45 on like an average day. Um, Not really a lot of bad days going into Queens because most of the struggles happen towards Manhattan.
Right.
Luckily enough. But yeah, that made it a lot better for sure. I had more time for myself because that hour and a half commute, that just left room for me to cry on the train. Like, we're not gonna do that, you
Yeah.
know. Like,
I mean,
it was
honestly
bad.
speaking, if we're talking like, like working hourly and all that stuff, like some people
Mhm.
really do pick up another job on the side. And it's like, I
I've
think
done
of
that
those hours
too.
as like, that's another couple hours I could be working or doing
Hmm.
something else that I could be, doing and making money to
Yeah.
hopefully maybe, afford to live where I live. But
Hmm. Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And you just brought up like, yeah, sometimes the trains doesn't even work. Like our bus workers were on strike for the past couple months.
Oh. Hmm.
Um, so they straight up were canceling like my buses
Oh
like for
man.
the whole day. So it's just like,
How do you get
yeah.
there?
And I'll tell my boss about it. It's like, oh, that kind of sucks, but it's also like, okay, but I'm still showing up to work. So
Hmm.
like, again, when it works, but when it doesn't, it just messes with you,
Yeah. We definitely get the short end of the stick as people who are workers. Um but yeah, I say the commuting and just the money struggle. My goal for myself is like if I'm working all these hours and completely mentally drained and physically drained, I end up both as a dance teacher. if I'm doing all this, I'm working more than 9 hours, I'm gone from my home for more than 10 hours that I pay rent for, might I add. Like, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So then I'm not even home as much as I would like to be. Most of the time I'm
Right.
home, I'm asleep. Um, I would love the idea of like, if I'm gonna work all this, I would love to have the idea of financial freedom. I should be able to work, be drained, and be able to conveniently, not conveniently, like properly, comfortably, there we go, comfortably pay my bills and still be able to do the things I want to do. My struggle this summer, I was like, great, I'm a teacher, have a summer. I don't think I have money for vacation. I was like, I can't even go on
Mm-hmm.
vacation. I made it work, but I had to cut some things. Like I had to do some puzzle piecing and maneuvering to do it. And I'm still vacationing on a budget, but I was like, there's no way I'm just gonna sit here all summer. I was like, I just did a whole freaking year of school and I'm drained and I want to be able to treat myself. Um, but that yeah, I would like that idea. But once again, as you said, like the money does not equate. Like rent's high, people like go
Yeah.
buy a home. Buying
And I
homes are high.
and I
Like
think that's
there's
why like minimum wage is so important to talk about sometimes because
yeah,
we also like we live in two different literally ends of the the country. So like
yeah,
the prices there, the prices here, how much it costs to live in places, food costs, like all those things like vary. And like, if you work for like, because I work for under like a very big corporate structure. So it's like, oh, they're like, oh, this person might should make this much amount of money for this job and for the qualifications, blah blah blah.
yeah,
Um, versus, oh, but the city requires you to make the income of like a biology, like lab scientist in
mm-hmm.
order to live comfortably. So like even like just defining what living comfortably means is so hard for us because
Yeah,
we're just constantly in a cycle of things are never the same. Like prices always change. Um, we hear about things that have a significant financial impact. Like think like the Supreme Court case is a really good example of that. Like,
mm-hmm.
just knowing that like tons and tons of people, like this is really minimizing it, but tons of people just aren't able to have that comfort of having some of their loans forgiven because they don't know what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah,
Like those are major kind of financial things that happen. And we live, I think, in a society where like there's such a big disparity where like there's people
mm-hmm.
who like we technically fall somewhere like I don't know, maybe like lower middle
Yeah, I would
class, I would
say,
say, maybe, I don't know,
mm-hmm.
but like there's so many people who are like have it so much worse than us, and then there's people who
Mm-hmm.
have it extremely better
Way
than us.
better. Yeah,
And it's
mm-hmm.
it's just such a big disparity. And like people have all their opinions and we put it into a hat, but it's like when are we actually listening to the people that are like working these jobs?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where unions come. That's where
Yeah,
unions come in, and that's where like all these like different movements come in. But also like
mm-hmm.
there's only so much they can do. you
Yeah. I was just
know
about to
like
say, is even
like
then.
this is all like I don't know. It's wild to me that like an employer sets all these rules, right? And then the union has to like go out of their way, work out of their hours,
Mm-hmm.
to advocate for pretty much an entire company or like organization or like a city or district at that point, and advocate for these things only for it to like marginally get better for the people involved. Like, I think there's a something to be said about like how these struggles sometimes we equate it to ourselves because our personal lives come into it,
Mm-hmm.
but in reality, a lot of these struggles happen as a result of just what the structures are in place, like what the city or the government or whoever, or your employer even might set
Mm-hmm.
to say this is how you should be living your life, or this is how you should be, you know, this is how much we think you're worth.
Yeah.
So I just want to acknowledge that just because I feel like sometimes like I get into trap of like, well, maybe if I just manage my time better, if I manage my money better, like things will be
Mm-hmm.
better. But also like part of it is personal responsibility, but also part of it is like what times we're living in as people.
Yeah. Also, too, like we just happened to also graduate in a really weird time, which is kind of unfortunate. But yeah, things just kept
Yeah.
getting more expensive. Um, I do want to move on to like alternative work models. Um, so certain ones that do exist and I've seen happen, and I kind of hope for myself in the future. Um, are like the 4-day work week. So some companies have like implemented, a Monday through Thursday system. So
Hmm.
their employers have Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, which I think is really cool. Um, I've also seen companies do kind of like trying to step into that world, but like cutting Fridays early. So they'll purposely be like, oh, Fridays we stop working at 12 p.m. And then I've
Okay.
also seen specific like shorter work days. So instead of a 9 to 5, we do something a little different. Um, what do you think about those alternative options?
I think alternative is like, see, in an ideal world, like we would overhaul the entire work system. But
Yeah.
I think alternative work models are like ways we can kind of get closer to that.
Hmm.
One thing that you that I know like you also like mentioned briefly is like remote work too. Um,
Yeah.
I do my boss is nice enough to let us have remote days. In a traditional sense, we're not supposed to, but
Yeah.
it's like we get a couple of remote days. So like that helps a lot. Like we sit around the table and we talk about what we do during remote days because like especially for me, like based on like I have a very customer service heavy role, so I do have more time
Hmm.
at home where I can fit multiple things in. Like I'll be doing my laundry in the middle of my workday, like
Yeah.
things like that. Like I think like in a way, like when things don't work, having these alternative work models is like a good backup plan. Like having, like
Hmm.
you said, if you have Fridays cut a little bit early, like that's 4 hours. You can go get your appointments done that you can't schedule in during your regular work days, or
Hmm.
have a little bit of time that if you haven't had any, if you sit all day, right? Like maybe that's some time for you to get some physical exercise or
Hmm.
things like. So I'm a big fan of that, just because I feel like as a society we not to say as a society so many times, but as a
No, it's true.
society, like we make so much progress in our like quality of life, like
Hmm.
technology makes things easier. We learn to communicate better over, when the pandemic happened, we learned how to communicate better in terms of like ways of communicating over video and audio and
Hmm.
things like that. Like I think we are ready to evolve how our life works, because if everything around us in the world is changing, then the way that we live our life should be a little bit different. So I'm all for that. Like I think there's plenty of talented people out there to be like, hey, if we can get work done in a similar amount of like in a less amount of time, but just more
Hmm.
efficiently, then maybe we should cut those hours that we don't need instead of adding more
Exactly. Yeah.
instead of adding more work to do. Or um,
Mhm.
um Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 is like, or 9 to 5 is like a structure available. I think of customer service a lot. Like, we want readily available customer service, especially like food and like grocery shopping and like things like that. Like, we want those things to be open a lot more. So, in a way, it's also thinking about like, well, maybe how does that work if, in the service industry, are people willing if maybe hours are a little bit shorter?
Yeah.
If you have to fit things in a smaller like time crunch, would people be okay with that? I think about those kinds of things. Or maybe like, again, minimum wage, like if we work a 30-hour work week, but it's fine because we are able to make a livable wage. Like I'm
Hmm.
always open to exploring, and I don't think there's a specific one solution fits all, just because
Oh
like
yeah, of course.
this
Hmm.
country is so freaking huge, and like there's
Hmm.
so many different work types and things that are expected from people. um I think honestly the uniformity of having like, oh, everything needs to be a 9 to 5 and things need to be this way is actually what hurts a lot of our
I
industries.
I
Like
agree.
teaching, for example, like it's wild that like, like I think the biggest thing people talk about is like teachers using their own pay to pay for stuff in school for the children that they teach. And
Hmm.
like, I mean, a band-aid solution is to like, oh, have a stipend, for things like that.
Hmm.
But then also it's just like, why do we even get here in the first place?
Exactly. I agree with that. I think that's so weird. I'm in a good place in a sense where because of charter school and they make so much like funds, I don't have to do that. Um,
Thank goodness.
at least not I don't do that often if if ever. Most of the time they approve my purchases. Um, but yeah, I agree because specifically public schools, they have to do that. And I think that's so ridiculous that we've gotten to a place where the country's so comfortable with that. Like that's
Yeah.
Weird. And then also teachers are underpaid. So then like they're underpaid and you're making them buy the supplies. That's a bit wild.
And
Um,
they don't get the remote work off. Like they have to be there every
yeah.
day for and that's
Hmm.
another thing too. It's like if they have to be there every day, then obviously then time isn't really something that's as negotiable for folks because they want their children in school Monday through Friday. Then
Hmm.
if that's the case, then really money is the only way to really increase the value of where you're working, just because like
Exactly.
where do you give them that extra boost that they need. I don't want to say boost because that's not even a boost. It's like the bare minimum,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're just redefining what bare minimum means for a lot of people and how a lot of work models don't meet that. So yeah, alternative work, like going back on topic, I feel
Hmm.
like those are almost necessary in this age. And if it's one thing that COVID is like good thing that came out of COVID is that these need to be legitimized, and
Yeah.
like it kind of forced a lot of places to adjust because they had no other choice but to. And now I'm glad there's like this conversation of people are like, well, even though we're slowly starting to get out of what 2020 is, we still want to keep some of these changes that we made because it's for the betterment of everybody.
Yeah. I do agree. We started to see remote work be more blended. Like, for example, maybe they were like, well, we don't want you doing it fully remote, which is like another topic. Because if it can be fully remote, why don't you want fully remote?
Yeah.
But like some people will be like, well, we don't you fully remote, but we'll give you like 2 days remote at home. Okay. That helps a blend. That ended up working out for some people because I know like my mom, she was like, oh, I'm remote, I'm so excited. And then she ended up being remote for so long. She was like, I need to get out of the house a bit,
Mm-hmm.
So she that blend works for her. Like you said, everyone doesn't work the same way. So the fact that this whole 9 to 5 thing is structured and supposed to be like the thing is weird. For me, I think I would thrive in a 4 day work week. I think I would thrive in like a hybrid situation as well. um I've been purposely like in this transition that I'm trying to make, applying for jobs that I know would be good for my balance that I'm going for with work and
Mm-hmm.
life, because I really am striving for that. I've been working towards it in my second year of teaching. Because my first half of the year, my first half of the year was like horrible. I wasn't taking care of myself. I got my first gray hair. I was like, we're not about to be
Uh,
stressing that bad, because it literally came up overnight, and I was like, if it comes up overnight, like that's not good. But I was like, you know,
Me having gray hair since middle
I
school.
know, yeah.
I'm just kidding.
But for me, it just like made me realize I was like, I had really been stressing out and not taking care of myself.
Yeah.
I came out here, moved here because I was excited for the dance opportunities, and I didn't take my first dance class until like 4 months after I had moved, because I had been so like kind of like buried in the work, and I was like, that's
Yeah.
unfair to me, and I'm not taking care of myself. And once again, this job is not going to care about me, but they will find someone else. So
It's literally depriving of your
yeah.
passions. Yeah,
Hmm.
like
So I really like fought to like at least have a better balance. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be a dance, because my first half of the year I was a science teacher. I was like, no, I asked to be a dance teacher. I'm going to be a dance teacher. I want you to
mhm.
transition that process, closer school if possible, if not, um, and then just kind of had to advocate for myself a bit. As also with pay, they were overworking me. They were paying me like associate teacher pay, and I was like, no, I'm doing lead teacher work. I'm in the
Yeah.
classroom by myself.
You
I'm
have
gonna
to
need
make
you
it
to,
match.
yeah, exactly. I was like, I'm gonna need you to put that up, and they were like, you know what, you're right. And I was like, thanks. Pay is still low, but at least I'm getting paid to what it's supposed to be. But that's
You're not being paid dirt, but just the bare minimum.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I definitely think I would thrive. And I think it definitely works, because there's been like different countries who's even like incorporated this. Like Belgium incorporated like 4 day work week. And like other countries have like done like test trials and stuff. And they've said like businesses, from a business perspective, they were like, ooh, it improved productivity. Why? Because they're not as drained, right? They're
Yes.
like, ooh, morale and team culture, better team culture, because they're not as drained, therefore they're not aggravated, they're refreshed. um so I really think that's it's helpful for the businesses and the companies, but then on the employee side, as we said, we're reducing our personal burnout. We have more life satisfaction because we're not at work 24/7.
Right.
And then you don't, we're just like, we're taking care of ourselves, whatever that may look like. Everyone does it differently, but at least they're doing it. And I don't think it's happening as much just because that time is not allotted.
Well, I love that you bring up the idea of like morale because like I think there's something to be said like 1 hour of a motivated, high morale employee is probably gonna get more work done than like 3 hours from someone who's burnt out. Like I think it legitimizes the idea of like a 4 hour, like not 4 hour, 4 day work model, like more viable because it is like, oh yeah, like people, because I think the main concern people always come with is like, well, you can just get, you're gonna get less stuff done in the
Mm,
week, and you're gonna fall behind in like work or like your company goals or whatever. But I think there's also a lot to be said about like we don't like I don't think I only speak for myself here, but most people who work 40 hours a week isn't completely working those entire 40
no, no.
40 because
I've
we need
watched
because
YouTube,
yeah, I could be on. I know Reddit's a big one, like
right?
or
A
like
little
you
TikTok.
take small breaks or
Yeah.
you're talking to your coworkers or things
Mm-hmm.
like if we really want efficiency and we really want like people to because there's no way we can do the whole 8 hours thing like back to back just doing
No.
work like
Yeah.
that's just not a human thing.
Mm-mm.
I don't think it's a human thing. I've definitely worked days like that, but like it's not like conducive to just being a human being in general. Like I don't feel like
Yeah.
it's a doable thing. So I appreciate that you bring that up because I feel like sometimes people bring up like, oh, this isn't viable, but you're like, no, like these countries are able to do it. It just takes restructuring and a little extra effort, which
Yeah.
that's the part where people aren't willing to consider.
Exactly. Yeah. I think there's this weird idea in like the government that if they're not working a 9 to 5, they're not working. And it's like, it's a fun fact. Like, I'm glad you brought that up as well. I'm not working 8 hours back to back. like,
No, yeah,
like I'll go and spend some time. Hey girl, how you doing? like,
yeah.
I need a break, you know, like let me go talk to somebody. Oh, I need a mental pause because as I said, my job is incredibly draining and I need those pauses midday as well. I'm just gonna eat my snack and just read real quick or something. Like the
Right.
amount of times I've seen a fellow teacher just chilling and reading or doing their own thing, we need that time. Nobody is out there doing it back to back to back. No matter how much you're like, oh, you're supposed to be doing this. Yeah, but you be chilling too. they be chilling too. So even management teams and things like that, they have their chill time because as I said, and as you said, no person is back to back working for 8 hours. You're gonna find a little coffee break, something. Something's gonna happen.
And
Um,
realistically speaking, I don't think people even have that much like again, this is just speaking from my perspective, but it's like people don't actually have that much work lined up. They don't expect you like,
that
yeah,
too.
this is gonna exactly take you 8 hours, so I'm gonna give you exactly this much to do. It's more like these are your hours. I have this for you, and then you get it done, and it's like, okay, I might have another thing for you, and it's like at that point, it's
Mhm.
just like, what do you even know what you're asking me to do? Like
Yeah.
so many times I've heard like because I work with part-time employees too, and it's like so many times I've heard like, oh, they're coming in today. Can you come up with something for them to do? And I'm like, hello, like if you don't need them, why are you
Tea.
bringing them in? And
Tea.
then also that doesn't mean that they should not pay them either, right? It's
Right.
like you have the work available for them if they finish the work. Like I work with very efficient people, so it's like if
Mhm.
they get it done, then they get it done. And if that's all you have for the day, I say just let
Yeah.
them go. You know,
Thank
like
you.
like
Be
it's and I think that like speaks to like maybe is it based on how much work we do or merit-based work or like the quality of the work that dictates our pay.
I think they just want to take our time, to be honest. I really
Yeah,
do.
because I also want to approach it from like like we don't have to be the best workers in our space. We don't have to
Mm.
be like
Nope.
these superhuman level of expectations. Like
Mhm.
people who don't work as quick or maybe have a harder time at work should also be able to make a livable wage and be able to do the things that they want to do. And I think
Yeah.
it's like then so I don't know, I feel like we just need to have like that's where I feel like having choice is really important.
Mhm.
Like maybe like when you bring up remote work, like you brought up like how some people don't like being at home by themselves and things like that, like
Yeah.
and I met people who are like, yeah, I don't like remote work, like I want to be in person. Like I can't relate to that, but they can.
Yeah.
um like for them it's like maybe if we just had the choice.
I think
Like
that's important. Yeah.
just giving folks the options and just
Hmm.
being like, hey, like one big thing for my like, I don't want to put my coworker on like blast or whatever, but it's like she literally has to switch up jobs because like her schooling is conflicting with the hours of her work and they're not
Mm,
meeting up. So she literally has to search for another job. And it's like if she had the choice of when she wanted to work, like
exactly.
that
Hmm.
wouldn't have been such a big thing, like it wouldn't have
Hmm.
affected her the way it has. But um,
Yeah. Can I add to
that's where I feel
that?
like your work goes into your like how your success looks like, just because
Yeah.
like your work can either set you up or completely go against like what your
Hmm.
goals for success look like.
Yeah. To add to that, I want to say, because for me, it's hard to balance like my goals of like my dance career and
Mm-hmm.
finding that time. Like auditions happen Monday through Friday midday, you know, or I'm in the morning. But I have a full-time job in order to sustain, my living.
Right.
um Part-time would be the perfect ideal because those are when you can create your own hours. But as we said earlier, you don't get the benefits. Part-time usually isn't paying as it should and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is the ideal, like choose when I work. And then that's what when you also start rolling into people doing their own thing, freelancing or entrepreneurship, they create their own schedules. I would also
Yeah.
love that too, because at this point, I'm like, the odds are against me. Like, I really would just love to, if I could do part-time and have a sustainable living, I totally would, to create my own hours, do my own thing. Um, and I think there's 9 to 5s out there that, do that. Those 8-hour work, the companies that are more flexible with your schedule,
Mhm.
those people that are adapting those 4-day work weeks, the people that are changing up their hours in their workday. But they are hard to find. They are rare as well. Um, but I'm glad you mentioned that. Um, I do want to ask a question in regards to like finding work-life balance and what that success has looked like for you. Um, Out of curiosity, what are some like strategies and tips that you have used to at least try to have like a sense of well-being um in like pursuing your personal goals outside of your work hours?
Yeah, I think not to be cliche, but like I think first of all, just being aware of what you need is a really big part. Like
That's
I know
true.
that's a strange thing to say, but out of college, I really didn't know what I needed sometimes, like I just felt weird and I'm
Hmm.
like, what do I need? Turns out it was therapy. So like,
Yeah.
that's one thing for me. It's like if you need like therapy is one really big thing I would advocate for, because like if
Yeah.
you really need that, and a lot of times I think mental health becomes a big part of the equation here, just because
Hmm.
of the nature of work and what that looks like. Being able to have those, and this again coming from a privileged perspective, like I have insurance to be able to cover that, but
Yeah.
not everybody does. So it's really about just finding something that can help you. You know, I don't want to say take the place of therapy, but just something therapeutic is something that's
Yeah.
um very realistic. I know we bring up exercise, like I don't want to like bring it like as like, oh, you need to be doing something intense or anything like that, but
Mhm.
even like going on a walk,
Just a walk.
or
Yeah.
yeah, or like just small stuff like that helps a lot. Because I think about like people are like, oh, you need to be going to the gym, and I'm like, well, some people don't make enough to be able to pay for a gym membership. Like, like that's a big
Exactly.
thing. So I don't want to like come from a place where it's like, oh, this I want like tips that can apply to everyone. So like, yeah,
Hmm.
like even walking is a big thing that can help. One
Yeah.
thing that helps a lot for me, and this isn't like a specific like tangible strategy, but it's like knowing how to advocate for yourself. Like
Hmm.
when I was first in the work scene, like I was very much like, oh, I don't want to make anybody mad, or I don't want to like, step on any toes or anything like that. Like I'm just a newbie, so I don't feel like I have a lot I can say. But in reality, it's like no one's gonna really advocate for your needs except for yourself. Like
Yeah.
there was one day where I just had to tell my boss, like, hey, I'm just not having a good time. Like everything was fine the way that it was supposed to be, but my mental health was just not there at that day. And
Yeah.
some places aren't very accommodating towards that, but it's like being able to advocate for yourself regardless, and being like, hey, these are my needs and I need these needs met,
Hmm.
and I want to work together to like find a solution is,
Yeah.
I think, a really big thing. And that requires you to like know yourself and know like what your limits are and what you're willing to do and what you're not. Like,
Yeah.
um, setting boundaries, like those things sound very like basic and sometimes a little bit easy, but also it's like when push comes to shove, like let's say you're someone a really nice coworker
Hmm.
asks you to, like, hey, can you do like an extra hour of work, and you want to do it for them because you like them, but then also at the same time like knowing those boundaries and being like,
Yeah,
hey,
hard stop.
like I'm really tired today, I need to leave, like that was something I had to learn for myself, like saying no is okay to,
Yeah.
and it's reframing your mind to be like, it's not that I hope people aren't mad at me, but it's like people
Hmm.
shouldn't be mad at me to that.
100%.
And if
Yeah.
they are, then like that's something that they need to work on in terms of like their expectations for people. But
Mm.
it's just that rewiring, I think, especially coming out of college where like it's such a people pleasing kind of area where like you just want to be liked, and have approval
Yeah.
from the people you work for and the people around you. Like it's a different world outside of that. So
Yeah.
um yeah, just advocating for yourself and just being like, yeah, I
Yeah.
deserve so and so, and that
I
mentality.
I like that. I am a huge like promoter of that as well. I've also been figuring that journey out. Um, I have had moments where I've advocated for myself and I've gotten pushback, and then I had to push right back again
Right.
because I
Right.
know the things that I ask for are not ridiculous. I'm very self-aware and I really think a lot before I do make actions. And
Right.
so like if I'm asking you for something or I'm asking for balance or I'm asking for um reasonable expectations in the work I do, then I'm going to push back on you and tell you that now you're being unreasonable.
Yeah.
And then usually they found that they won't admit it, but they'll be like, oh, okay, well, here's what we're gonna do. I've the pro was me changing schools and being closer. The con was me dealing with a different management team and them just
Yeah.
having a very interesting environment, but that's a whole other story. But I agree with that. In that case scenario though, I did find advocating for myself, but also then deciding, once again, reminding myself I'm important. My dance pursuits are important. Those are the things that I
Yes.
prioritize. Yes, I will put in the work I put in for the kids, but I'm going to be strategic about it. So I can get work done fast. I'm focused. I have things on my to-do list, making sure I get them done at work. Being a teacher, I didn't mention this in this podcast, but sometimes a lot of that work ends up having to come home. So I didn't even talk about what those hours could look like, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I've been really strategic with trying to make sure I do things in those work hours so I don't have to take it home with me. Easier said than done because, as you said before, people love to waste time. Why are we have a meeting and you have nothing to say? You know, like you're saying nothing right now. You just want to
Yeah.
waste my time because you have to
Yeah.
put a meeting in place. Like, don't do that. I really am a big one on like be aware of the time that you were taking from people. Don't just take time just because you want to and you want to say that they were working. I could be working and not being in front of your face.
Yeah.
As a teacher, I do that
Oh my goodness.
already. They were like, "Oh, if you can't get it done here, take it home." Okay, then. Well, if you don't need me here, let me go home. Right?
Yeah, you have like one thing to contribute for like the first 5 minutes, and then you're stuck for the rest of the
Right.
time.
Like they
And
just be mushing. You can tell too when they don't have anything.
yeah, thanks for saying that too, because it's so many times I've been asked to like participate in meetings. They're like, "Can we meet about this to discuss this?" And I'm like, "Okay, sure." And then I go into it, and then you realize that it's just an email that they sent you
Yeah.
that they're just repeating over and over. And again, I think it goes
I
back to
hate
like no
that.
one's really working for the entire 8 hours, and they need to find something to do to fill it up. And I
Hmm.
think that's what really just annoys me. It's just like we don't need to find more work to do.
Exactly.
Like if we do what we need to do, then maybe we need to like rethink like what our work days look like. But
Yeah.
I don't think the solution to that is like giving more work. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just yeah. Sometimes
100%.
meetings are good because it takes you away from like like crunch, like being on your computer or whatever. But like for the most part, it's
Yeah.
really not that interesting.
I've been in productive ones, but like the thing is though, like they're very rare. Like
Yeah.
I have to gear myself up to go back to work at the end of the month, and the first 2 weeks of coming back is just meetings after meetings after meetings, and a lot of them. don't need to happen. So I'm mentally preparing myself for that. Because a lot of them don't end up being productive. And sometimes they listen to us when we say that, and sometimes they don't. And we'll see what happens this year. But I do want to say though, specifically for me in finding my um maintaining my care and pursuits, I said I'm me first. So I was like, no, I haven't taken a dance class in a week. No, I'm taking a dance class. Yeah, I'm a little tired from work. Okay, so what do I need to do to take that workload off and prioritize my main goals in my main journey? Also ends up being exercise and me moving my body outside of,
Mhm.
the my work environment. And um I just think that helps, watching TV and not just coming home, showering and going to sleep, like simple things like that you would think. But I really just found time for me reading on the train now, emphasize, like, I enjoy reading things like that. So
Yes.
I really tried to find blends in which I can mesh it a little bit more into my daily living. um Once again, easier said than done. It's still a journey, because one day I could have a whole bunch of work to do, and one day I have the easiest day ever. It's never the same. Um,
Right.
so that's a struggle. But I did want to ask you, last question before
Mhm.
we head off. What do you think the future of work looks like for us? Do you think that the US will adapt to alternative ways? And if so, do you think it will happen soon, later? What do you think is gonna happen?
I think I think there's gonna be a struggle just because I mean we already see it now. Like it's like people already like being against the idea of remote work because they think it limits productivity or blah blah blah. Like, people trying to scare people into going back into the workplace.
Hmm.
Um, for me, I think there's gonna be a struggle of like differing opinions about what needs to happen. For me, what I guess like what I would want to see in the future is like again just more flexibility and more options for people. Like I want to see diverse work styles. Like we kind of see it now, like depending on the industry that you're in, like an
Yeah.
actor's workday is going to look completely different from like a teacher's workday, but
Hmm.
like just even more diverse than that. Like I want to see like how a company uses their time to accomplish the goals that they set out to do,
Yeah.
how they consider time and money to be, equivalent. And I think that really just comes with having I want to say a mix of like set policies, like of the backbone of things like, minimum wage and,
Mm-hmm.
hour work days and things like that, but also, you know, um how each company or boss or person chooses just how intentionally they want to use their employees. I think like we're at the cusp. I think like I don't think we are heading into a society where it's like, oh, we're gonna go back to just regular structure. Like I think there's
Yeah.
enough of an outcry from people to reconsider it. I just don't think it's gonna happen as quickly as we wanted to. Like we're in pretty progressive areas, like you and me, like we're in pretty progressive areas of the nation. So I can see
Hmm.
it happening more likely for us. But I also think about like the service industry. Like I can't imagine the amount of outcry that people are gonna have because like let's say for example we go to a 4-day work week and Friday counts as a weekend. Um
Yeah.
like how some like shops, how customers would take that and how that would look like. And like I think I don't want to say that we as a collective need to take sacrifices, but I do think there's like changes that need to
Hmm.
happen. And it's a conversation of whether like the greater society wants that because we love the status quo. We
Hmm.
want things to stay the same. So
Yeah.
when push comes to shove and when inconveniences and changes need to happen, like I just want to I'm just wondering how that's going to work out. But I
Yeah.
think there's definitely going to be a change. I just don't know what it's going to look like. What about you?
I agree. I too wonder what it's going to look like, because we are starting to slowly see it, but once again, we see it in specific industries. I see tech companies, to be honest, having more of that fluidity and
Mm-hmm.
flexibility,
Yeah.
than other more like business-based companies outside of, like the irregular schedules of like actors and dancers and people
Right.
who are like entrepreneurs and stuff. Um, so I would like to see that happen more. I It is hard because, like, as you said before, teachers are relied on to, low key babysit the children so the parents can work their 8-hour shift. Um, so I think it would help if it was fully adapted some way. Um, and so then everyone's in a balance, and maybe that 4-day work week is like the helpful solution. I don't see any working person opposing that, but I do see government opposing it. And that's a whole other thing. But
Yeah.
I have an issue with people who haven't really been working 9 to 5s for a very long time making decisions for us. But
Yep.
I would love to see it. I just don't know when it would happen because I definitely see a lot of pushback because we're so used to everything being the same, just like you said,
Right.
that status quo. And I see that happening because we see that happening already with
Right
like,
now.
yeah, which is
Yeah.
so annoying. But
Right
yeah,
now.
we see that happening right now. So I can only imagine what they would think in regards to jobs. But I definitely think the way to go first in the way it's happening is like that slow company to company decision making. But I
Yeah.
think the company has to be willing, and they have to, as you said, I love that you said that, how intentional they want to, use their employees, because right now it's not intentional. There's no care in the employees. Therefore, there's these turnover rates and things like that. I think if they want to retain and keep these employees, they have to put some care into them, and that's not happening right now. So I would love to see that. Also, too, there's a different, like, for example, you got different companies in different places. Microsoft in one place, Microsoft in another. If, for example, Microsoft in, I can't think of the country now, but Microsoft in another place adapted a 4-day work week. Okay,
Hmm.
Microsoft, you're one company. So you saw it successful in one
Right.
country and just was like, nah. Okay, so y'all are trying to be cute at this point. Like
Yeah.
they don't care.
Like, are you acting because of the laws, or are you acting because like you
Just
actually care?
yeah. So I don't
Yeah.
know, but we'll see. I do hope for the best though, because I think our generation is seeing like, y'all been doing this. We're like, y'all been doing this
Yeah.
for this long, and y'all thought
Yeah.
this was
We
okay.
have the nerve. We have the
Yeah, like we have the
audacity.
nerve to say something because it's just like it's this idea of, oh, you just gotta work, to get the money and stuff. But we're seeing like, but the money is not paying the bills the way they're supposed to. So I'm not about to be working like this decades along the line. Like this is ridiculous. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would love to see changes. Um, Listeners, tell us what you think. This is a topic that could go on forever. I could talk
I know,
about
right?
this for so long in so many different ways. Um, do you think the work style is going to change? What's your favorite type of alternative work style, your ideal work style? As I said, I love the idea of a 4-day work week. I also love remote work. Same for Andrew. Like I think I'm a remote girly. But let us know. You can always let us know in the Q&A section. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining today's episode and sharing your thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I pulled you for this episode because like everything that you said is just like I was catching it.
I love
Um
chatting with you. It's
yeah,
always a great time.
I know, same. Um and also make sure if you oh wait, I did want to mention poll, yes or no, is 9 to 5 a scam? So
Oh,
I do want y'all to think about this. Do you think 9 to 5 is a scam? My vote, I would say, is yes. That's my poll vote.
yeah. I went into this kind of like maybe, but now I'm more like a solid yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've convinced you and me. I convinced myself, and you convinced me. Yes.
Yeah, I was like, I'm pretty sure I was already a yes, and I was like, I'm gonna wait till the conversation, and I'm still 100% yes. But yes, to the listeners, go ahead, go to that poll section, answer yes, no, and I'll put a maybe. And also, if you want to give a more detailed response, answer in that Q&A section. Don't forget to share, like, and follow this podcast. Send it to a friend, a family member, a loved one. Follow me at KaVonna on Instagram to get podcast updates and just stay updated on what's going on. Get some sunshine, get some air, have an amazing week. I will see you next week on the Introverts Social Hour. Thanks for joining. Bye.